Hello and welcome to Weathered Oak Media. I'm Will and I hope you're all doing well out there. For this video, I'm going to do something a little bit different. This is a special project, a personal project, something I've been meaning to get to for quite some time, and I'm finally making some time this year to get to it. I would like to introduce all of you to a very old friend of mine. This was my first guitar, given to me about 30 years ago from my late grandfather. It is a vintage Raven hollow body electric. I'm not sure if the camera is getting the name there, but don't worry, you're going to see lots of pictures of it. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you may have heard me mention in some of my videos that I've been meaning to restore an old guitar. Well, this is that guitar, and I would really like to tell you all about it in just a moment. Welcome back once again. I'm Will. Thanks for sticking around. So as I mentioned a moment ago, I've got this vintage Raven guitar that I'm going to make playable again. But before I get into some details about this guitar, I'd like to take a second here to tell you about the man who gave me this guitar. As I mentioned in my intro, this guitar was given to me about 30 years ago from my late grandfather, Frank. And just like his dad before him, he worked in the logging industry here on Vancouver Island. And, it was a hard life for them back then. And now, these days I'd rather save a tree than cut one down. But I get it, and this is the work that these men had available to them, and this is what they did to survive and make ends meet for their families. He was a hardworking man, just like his dad. And I inherited that hardworking spirit, even though I work in different industries. But for as hard as my grandpa worked, he also partied pretty hard too. And that brings me to this photo here. This is pretty awesome. This is taken in the early 1950s. I apologize for the poor quality of this photo. It's a scan of a scan off of my mom's computer, and the resolution wasn't really all that great. But all the same, you can kind of see here that my grandpa's looking cool. That's my grandma there with him. Isn't she pretty? And, he's got the cigarette there with him. He's got an acoustic guitar. I'm not sure what brand. It's not this guitar. And, there's a few alcohol bottles there, right? So he was having some fun in this photo. It's a pretty cool photo. I like this. Well, unfortunately, an accident took my grandpa out of service and he had to retire from the logging industry, and actually he ended up having to put away the guitar. The accident actually badly damaged some muscles and tendons in his hands, so he was unable to play the guitar, which meant that this guitar ended up sitting in storage for a decade or two until I came along. Circa 1994, so 30 years ago, my grandpa gave me this guitar as a graduation present, but it came with a catch. I was a year away from graduating, so I had to finish that year of high school. And if I dropped out of high school, he would take the guitar away. Well, I kept my promise, and I did graduate from high school. I may not have been an honor student, but I did it. And I dug around, and in fact, the only photos I can find of myself with the guitar from that era are the outtakes from my high school grad photo set. Now in this photo, I'm about 17 years old or so. These days I've got a lot less hair, I've got a lot of gray coming in now, but I still have the guitar. Now you can imagine my pure joy at the age of 17 when I cracked open this old brown case and saw this beautiful guitar inside. I couldn't believe that my grandpa was giving me this guitar. I just couldn't believe it. Now something I discovered though was that this case wasn't actually made for this guitar, so the Raven actually doesn't really fit very well. It moves around a lot. So anytime I had to move or travel anywhere with this guitar, I would just pack in some extra t-shirts or pillowcases or something just to keep it from flopping around in the case. Now here's something that's also kind of cool, is that inside the case with the guitar were these old vintage guitar instructional books that my grandpa said I could keep. Some of these date back to the early 1950s, making them way older than the guitar itself. I'm actually pretty excited to have these. They might be just as collectible as the guitar. My Raven guitar is a copy of the popular style of hollow body electrics made by Gibson and Epiphone in the 1960s and 70s. The body is made from laminated maple, completely hollow except for a small block that sits under the bridge. It has 2 humbucking pickups with stapled poles, a 3-way pickup switch, and volume and tone pots for each pickup. There's also the Bigsby-style vibrato with a cool harp-shaped block of decorative rosewood. The floating bridge with roller saddles also sits on a nice chunk of rosewood. She has a 3-piece maple neck and the same vintage tuners as her Epiphone cousins. The body's in great shape for over 50 years old. The serial number that's here unfortunately doesn't help me narrow down a year, so I really had to kind of dig around. The actual model my Raven was based on is the Epiphone 5102T, made in Japan between early 1970 and mid-1972. Around that time, Gibson was importing all of their Epiphone guitars, and most were made by the Matsumiko factory in Japan. In mid-1972, the 5102T was renamed the EA250, a cousin of the Riviera, and given a few cosmetic changes such as the chrome-covered pickups instead of the black plastic, and they added their E logo to the pickguard. Since my Raven shares the same features as the 5102T, it's a safe bet that it was also built in the same era between 1970 and 72, and most likely on the same production line as the Epiphones. So this guitar was part of a production of guitars for the Canadian market sold under the Raven badge, but I've never seen another one like it. There are a lot of other similar guitars to the Epiphone made by other companies such as Commodore, Aria. I think even Gaiatone made a few copies. But again, there's a lot of differences between those guitars and mine. Most notably the color. This one, like its namesake bird, is black. Fun fact too, my favorite bird is the raven. And this black isn't even actually a true black. Depending on the light that hits it, you can actually see that it's a transparent black over top of the red. And in some spots along the body, you can see some red paint peeking through where the binding is. So I think that's kind of cool. This is a very rare bird, this raven. The last time I ever saw a Raven guitar that was similar to this was on an old eBay listing probably 10-15 years ago on the east coast of Canada. No idea whatever happened to that one. So that makes this, as I keep saying, this is a very rare bird, this Raven, and I'm very, very pleased to have it in my collection. I didn't realize at the time, as a cocky 17-year-old, that this would turn into a rare vintage guitar. I don't believe that it's worth a ton of money or anything like that, and it really doesn't matter because it's sentimental to me. It was my grandfather's guitar. And for my grandfather's, what would have been his 100th birthday, I decided this is the year that I'm going to bring it back to a more playable condition. So over the next little while, I'm going to film myself doing those little bits of work to this guitar, and I'm going to compile all of that footage together for part 2 of this series, which will be coming very soon. I might post a different video between then and now because I've got another idea in mind. So if you don't want to miss part 2 of this or any other video that I'm going to post, please hit that subscription button and hit that notification bell so that when I do post a new video, you'll know about it. And until then, please take care of yourselves and each other, and I do hope to see you again sometime.